I'm literally gonna die in 3 to 6 months if something doesn't change.
We had each other. You didn't have that because you were older than us.
When you reached out, gut reaction is no desire to do it. Like, it's just not me. The amount of growth from the family without this, that probably never would have happened.
Welcome to the Alex Perry on Fire podcast. And today's guest has been on the show before. A lot of people in town know that I have a twin brother, that I know that I have an older brother named Dom. And this is the oldest brother, Matt. So welcome to the podcast, Matt Perry.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm excited for today because I feel like through this podcast, you've learned a lot more about me. You've learned a lot more about Elliot, Dom, the parents, mom and dad, but also I think more about yourself. And we've had some conversations about it, but nothing really in depth. And so I think my first question to you is just when the podcast started going, what was just some feelings about that with talking about the family?
I think we've always kind of kept stuff tight from a family perspective. We didn't talk about emotions. I mean, I know that's been talked about by every one of the family members on the podcast, et cetera. But I think it was more like a sense of vulnerability that you guys were showing, and it was kind of a sense of growth. And I mean, I told you before we did the family one, I would never do this. Like, this is not me, even sitting here right now. But I think seeing it over a couple of years and going through some of the stuff I've been through, et cetera, it's kind of like you get to the point of why not? Like, open yourself up to it. How badly can it hurt at the end of the day? And even when you reached out last week or whatever, my gut reaction is no, I have no desire to do it. Like, it's just not me. I'm much more introverted than the rest of the family, et cetera. But even I got myself to justify it of, look, you got to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And even one of the things, which I'll fill you in at the end when you do your charity thing, but I was like, look, if I get out of my comfort zone and it can benefit someone else based on what I'm saying, or even the charitable piece, then why not do it? Like, at the end of the day. And so I think I've seen a lot from that. Like you said, the amount of growth from the family, vulnerability, dialogue, et cetera. I think without this, that probably never would have happened.
Yeah. And maybe it's a good place to kind of go back to a little bit because everyone has their own journey. But when I say and think back to where you're at, and just sharing with the audience, what would be a recap of where you are at your life and your age?
Being comfortable with who I am, and truly being comfortable, not saying that, but being really comfortable with kind of what life has thrown at you and what you've gone through. I'm probably more like Elliot. I've gone through multiple addictions, whether we get into that or not, this, that, and everything else. And I think getting past that, at least for me, was always being open about it. But at the same time, being introverted, it wasn't something that I kind of put out there a lot. And now I think there's just that much more of a willingness to do it.
Backtracking a little bit, what was your kind of entry into this world, your journey to getting to where you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I was the first child. Obviously, our mom's British. I think there was definitely some personality conflicts there. And I think I don't fault anybody for any of that. But at the same time, she was raising an American child. She had a British background, like, wasn't a natural fit. I struggled with my weight at a very young age. I left for boarding school when I was 12. So I didn't have that family bond to an extent.
Ellie and I talk about it, actually. And we're like, can you fault Matt for having some of the traumas? Like, we had each other. Ellie and I had each other. We had Dom for some of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a friendly face, right? That's someone who's got your back. You didn't have that because you were older than us. So was that journey lonely for you, or did that affect?
I think at the time you don't know any different. But was it lonely? For sure. And I think, we used to joke because the boys used to run around, and I'm dating myself. There was a movie called Goonies, right? And there was this kid called Chunk, right, who did the truffle shuffle, and he was the chubby kid who got picked on and everything else. And I think, combination of that at a young age where, excuse me, back then you got teased. Like that was just real. That's how kids were. And I think that probably drove a lot of me being an introvert, being closed off, like being very self-protective, at the end of the day and not having anyone. And, whether it was brothers, whether it was parents, whether it was close friends. I mean, the reality was I was the only kid, maybe there were two, only kid from California going to a boarding school on Vancouver Island. Like that wasn't typical either. And so a lot of those personal connections, it was really difficult. I think I went through that in college as well. Um, again, I don't resent any of it. I'm happy where things are now. And I think it makes you who you are to an extent. But was that difficult? For sure.
Yeah, and now you have a good attitude about it, but because you've quote unquote come out the other side, but you still have to face that each
Yeah,
day. Because you said it though, you're like, I still have eating
for
disorder,
sure.
and
Yeah.
so that's something you still have to overcome.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think you've got to take the good with the bad and understand where you came from and try and make incremental steps to be better with it. Dad was always more of a best friend than he was a father, good, bad, or indifferent, right? But that was also different in how I got brought up. But I had a lot of insecurity from being overweight when I was young, et cetera. Um, I came out of school back in the days where you would send resumes to everybody, and I thought, I'm going to get a job right away, and I couldn't control that. And so everything really became about control. And so I went from being addicted to weightlifting down to, at one point under 120 pounds, had a gambling addiction, et cetera. And, that was kind of the journey, just through a lot of stuff. And it was kind of how do you fulfill yourself with work or what do you keep yourself obsessed with to kind of keep your mind at peace? And that's something I continue to struggle with. And I think if you're, Elliot's a great example. If you go through addiction of any kind, you're never completely by it. It's how do you manage that in your day-to-day life?
Your addiction was in a different place and a totally different time. What was your feeling towards that once you saw Elliot dealing with that and the support he may have got from that? And what were you supported when you were going through your addiction?
Um, the former part is easier. I think seeing Elliot go through it, it was the dialogue we would have as family members where everyone's got their perception of how to deal with this, how to address it, et cetera. I think for me, at least I could rely on having gone through similar experiences, addiction in general, right? Totally different stuff. But at the end of the day, um, I think the value I could provide is a different perspective than everyone else who had really not been through it. Like no one had had addiction themselves. No one had been through it. They didn't really know a lot of people who had been. And so I think for me, it was just being able to share, like, here's probably where he's mentally at. Like, here's some of what he's going through. And even that was hard because I was still not super, extroverted, close with the family. So it was, in little points and individual one-off dialogues with you or mom or dad or whatever. Um, you know, the later question of do I resent, did I have the same level of support that Elliot did? No. Do I resent it? No. The reality is, I think who I am, like, I don't know that I would have been open to it. I think I had to hit rock bottom in a couple of different occasions, on my own to realize I was going to get better at one point with the eating addiction, or with the weight addiction, I looked in the mirror and I'd broken up with a girl I'd been with for years, who, at that point, and I was young, was quote unquote love of my life and everything else. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, I'm literally going to die in the next 3 to 6 months if something doesn't change. Um, Same thing with the gambling. Like I went on a trip to Vegas and had taken a lot of money. I won't even say how much. And in the first day I'd lost it all. I couldn't get home like until my flight. I didn't have the money to fly home and I didn't want to reach out to anyone to ask. That would have been super vulnerable and embarrassing. But at the same time, like I had to go through that to get better. And so I think there's always value in having support. In hindsight, yeah, I mean, I wish a little bit of that had been there, but I don't resent at all kind of what I went through and the support that was there versus kind of everyone being there for Elliot. Like, I'm just happy that it worked and he got past what he was dealing with. you've got to take steps further away from that to open yourself up. And it's for your own benefit at the end of the day, but also same thing of for everybody else around you, right? And so if me being open, telling my background or story, et cetera, can help other people, which I think is a lot of what you've gone through and Elliot's gone through, et cetera, then why not do it? And I think I may have said this on the family podcast. You know, when I went through the divorce, one of the things that really resonated with me, there was a country song, and I can't remember the name of it or who sings it, but essentially it's who's going to show up at your funeral when you die. Like, and if you're not connected to other people, if you're not trying to help other people, if you're not open with who you are, how sad is it if no one shows up at your funeral?
We're all kind of living our own worlds. Brothers got along,
Yeah.
but living in our own worlds to the point where you said to me, like, man, my divorce was really, really hard. And I looked and I thought from the outside, surface level, I was like, well, Matt didn't want to be married anymore. Lucky him. Why would that be hard? And I didn't think of the mental side of a divorce, even when you want to be out of a marriage, what that could look like.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, I've always wanted to have I think it goes back to childhood, to be honest with you. I had, you know, probably not the best relationship with my mother. And so once I got to the age where I was starting to date or anything else, I never wanted to be on my own. And so pretty much since, you know, my early mid 20s, I've never been on my own. And maybe it wasn't always the right people, et cetera. But after, I can't remember how many years of marriage it was, to be honest with you. It was 26. So probably 16, 17 years. All of a sudden you realize you're on your own. And the one thing that I had always attached to, and I think positive I took from our father was I wanted to be there for my kids for everything. And even as they get older, you know, they want nothing to do with you or they're hanging out in their room, but it's just knowing that they're there and you can go be with them, talk to them, do whatever, go grocery shopping, like little connections. And all of a sudden you realize with the divorce, that's gone. Like you don't have somebody. And one of the biggest things, and you've known my girlfriend who I've been with for 3 years, who's salt of the earth and, you know, is definitely a different person than who I was married to. But one of the things in my mind after I went through it all was like, who am I going to travel with when I'm old? Like, and I'm on my own and my kids have their own lives and everything else. And I think that's always been a big piece for me. And I think going through the divorce, that was a lot of what I was mentally struggling with.
Yeah, because even though the world is huge, it can get
Yeah.
small.
And I didn't have that family connection, right? Like I hadn't been around the family, really around the family from like a personal connection in 15, 20 years.
Yeah. So that idea is, okay, now I have to do some work. It's not just going to come to me.
Yeah.
I have to do some work and we could call it to repair, right? Or to open up.
Yeah. To grow.
To create a relationship,
Yeah.
right?
100%.
And it takes, you know, it's funny as you say Ellie and I or whatever, but it just takes two people, right?
Mhm.
It does, you know, it also takes you then stepping out of that comfort zone and being vulnerable to
Yeah.
to ask certain things, I guess.
And there, you know, going through it all, there's definitely upsides to it, right? The stuff that used to piss me off with my ex-wife or in my family life or job, you know, the good side of going through something that I don't want necessarily call it traumatic, but whatever, is you realize what's important and what isn't. And so from that perspective, the things that used to piss me off or I'd get really worked up about, it's like, is it really worth it?
Well, it's funny you say that. Elliot told me the other day, he said something came up. He got hit with a huge bill that he didn't think was coming.
Yeah.
That normally would have sent him to the moon. And he faced it differently because of that. Now, again, a bill's a bill and it was really expensive, but in the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
you know, he's like healthy, happy. I'll pay the bill. I'll be angry and move on.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, it's all kind of becomes a little bit more relative. And you kind of dismissed it, which is what our family did. And again, I could say this with our mom. My mom, I said, Mom, you know, you've had trauma in your life. And she said, I've had no trauma. And I said, she trauma, that she didn't understand again what trauma was, right? Similar to Elliot, when he first checked in, he said, checked into Seasons and they said, we're here to deal with your traumas. And he goes, traumas? Maybe a trauma. But I think that's the environment we grew up in, which was, well, unless it's majorly traumatic, uh, it's not really a trauma.
No, and again, being introverted, I think I've always been self-aware enough to know kinda who I am, what the issues I have, what's driven everything. It's just, you bury that to an extent. That was my personality, and it doesn't really help, and I think when I've felt the most free is when I've been able to have dialogue with people about what I've gone through and just be transparent about it, and hopefully that helps people, but that was few and far between.
And when you say gone through, are you talking about the weight? Are you talking about the
I
divorce?
mean, I think all of it, to be honest with you. And, I mean, there are other things that I trying to think of the best way to frame it. You know, we had some interesting financial situations when I was growing up, good, bad, or indifferent. Both family and financial. I think part of the family stuff, and you guys weren't really old enough, but I mean, I remember our parents separating every other week when I was a kid, dad living on his boat. Like, I think that drove some of my attachment stuff and the financial stuff. Like, we were very fortunate, no questions asked. But, I remember there were times where, people were coming to repossess cars when things were down, where credit card bills weren't getting paid and you still had a phone in your house that people were calling all the time. And you're a kid picking up the phone and it's someone from a collection agency. And I think that drove a lot of my mentality around finance and well-being and everything else. And I think that also kind of drove a bit of a wedge between me and the rest of the family for lots of different reasons.
Well, yeah, and as a kid, you don't understand what that is, right? Like, it's you form your own opinion on it, and it sits with you,
Yep.
and then it influences your decisions
Forever.
forever, right? Your relationship with money, or like you said, your attachment style,
Yep.
or who you might marry,
Yeah, no, for sure.
right?
And I think it's, I think there was a good period of time where I didn't resent the success that anyone in the family has ever had, and I never would. But it also drove a feeling of inadequacy for myself based on what I had accomplished or what I had done and what I expected to be able to do. And same thing, you've got to get past that. Like, are you a good person? Are you better off than 90% of the world, et cetera? It's a lot of why I say, traumatic, yes. Do I regret anything I've been through? No. Like, it makes you who you are. But I think that there was a lot of that in the back of my head.
Yeah, maybe go into that a little bit more because not everyone has 3 brothers, and then 3 brothers living in the same city, right?
Yep.
And you being the introvert, people always saying, "Well, I saw your brother," or right? Maybe they wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or what's that? What's
it's you're highly visible, right? People know everybody in the family, and we're all very different personalities. At the end of the day, like God love Dom, and I wish there was parts of me that could be like him, but he's truly interested in like everyone around him and what they did this weekend. Whether I, if once I become close enough to you, I'll remember everything about you, your friends, your family, this, that, and everything else. But up front, like that's just not me. And that can be difficult at times. And, hopefully I can get better at that. But I think you guys were so well known. Everyone knew you. Everyone loved you guys, et cetera. Um, I'm a bit more crusty, old personality. And that was just not me. And I think it was hard for me to hear sometimes.
yeah, I would imagine, right? It just Elliot said it when we were all 4 together, which is it's like you're not trying to compare, the world compares,
Mm.
right? Right? It pushes you. It's like, people would ask Elliot and who's the better looking one? Who's the stronger one? Or who's this? And it does. And then you have this, I said to Dom on the previous podcast was like, there was some competitiveness, right? Like
Oh,
it wasn't like ill will, like I want you to do bad, but it was like, man, let me prove myself, right? Let
yeah.
me prove myself as a brother or in this family or as a man, as a male amongst 3 brothers. It's like, where do I fit in?
Yeah. And I think you take that, Dom may have done it a little bit with Reese, I don't know, but I mean, I definitely went down that road with my kids. Like, I love sports more than anything else. Like, I enjoy sports. It's how I've connected with my kids, et cetera. And I think, you know, people who know me, like lacrosse is a huge part of my life because that's what my kids love and how I've connected with them. And there was a time where I was, like, really excited about my older son, Mason, being a D1 athlete. Like, I was never good enough to get to that level. They didn't really have rugby in the US, and it didn't make sense anyway, but, like, that was a big thing for me, and I've had to pull myself back from that and say, "Look, he's had an awesome experience. We've made friends from all over the country, as has he, and he's kinda backed off the whole D1 thing, and I think he's good enough to play D1, but at the end of the day, if it's not what's best for him and what he wants, like, I've gotta subjugate my own ego, and it's like, it's not about that at the end of the day. And so I think you do that both within your own family as we did as brothers and as a family, but I've tried to make sure I don't necessarily go that deep with my own kids because I don't want them replicating it that with their kids at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I would say, like, I mean, that's some awareness, right? So that's you saying, "Okay, here's a pattern."
No.
Do you think you would have had that where do you think that wherewithal would have come from if you had stayed kind of in your lane, or is it the openness to kinda say, "Look, what am I ignoring or what am I missing?"
No, I think it's the openness. I think, my other son, Judd, who just turned 14, um, he's probably more like me personality-wise, from an introverted perspective, but, like, he doesn't love sports the way Mason did, and that's what we really connected on. He's great at art. He loves fishing. He loves hunting. I mean, the kid tore his hands up in his e-bike, and when he was down and he couldn't play sports, he made me ammo as a Father's Day gift, and he figured that out as a 13-year-old to go buy stuff on Amazon, which is kinda scary, but making me, like, 9mm and .45 ammo. Um, and so I had to really get away from myself and say, "This is what he loves. Like, how do I find a connection with him?" And we've started playing golf a ton together, which he's absolutely in love with, and it's not what I would have thought, but at the same time, it's so valuable and rich because it's what he's passionate about, and I think had I not gone through the divorce and some of the other stuff, I don't know that I ever would have gotten there.
Yeah, so just trying to see the benefit in it, and in real time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you had shared this with me, which I think is also I'm giving you credit, but a lot of awareness where you said, at one point, my 2 boys will be at school.
No, yeah.
They won't need me. I can't snap my fingers and have relationships with people. You just said it.
Yeah.
So I better put the work in now,
Yeah.
which for an introvert, not the easiest thing to do.
No, it's really, really hard, and we talked about that the other day, but, you can see the writing on the wall, and so, it's kind of what fulfills you at the end of the day, like, my kids will be gone at school, like, I've got a job, happy with my job, everything else, but it comes back to family and the other connections you have, and what do you enjoy doing, and who can you do that with, and I think I'm already starting to think through a lot of that, and I think luckily, the podcast and everything else has reconnected with me with family, which is kind of a built-in network at the end of the day. But it's also thinking beyond that, right? I remember when our parents moved down here and it was, we spent a lot of time and effort getting them into a country club. But had we not done that work, like, who would they be hanging out with? Like, who would they have as their own friends, et cetera? And so going through that process, I think, is super valuable.
Because you don't see it necessarily real time, but you're gonna see it in a couple years. Yeah, and I guess I'm pressing you on this, but you've learned so much, you've shared so much with me, like kind of offline about the podcast. Um, what is your thought? Because you've said it like it changed your relationship with your kids, but when I say love
Mhm.
and talking about love,
You know, I mean, and I know you've shared, like, we didn't say I love you. Like that, I didn't say that.
meaning you didn't
And
say that to your kids.
no, I'd never said it to my kids. Like, and we're not a super touchy-feely family. Like, I mean, we go back to the story about you hugging me at dinner the one night and me wanting to throw up. Not literally, but like, and now it's become kind of a running joke. But I think it was kind of the same thing with my kids. And luckily, I've recognized it earlier on. Like, I'm never going to be the one that goes up and give my kids a hug, right? And they'd be embarrassed as hell and everything else, and typical teenage boys. But actually saying I love you, right? Actually being invested in what my kids do. Judd and I found a fun thing a couple months ago. He was into Ultimate Fighting, and they don't watch TV shows anymore. They watch YouTube clips, but all of a sudden it was Ultimate Fighting. And so now every weekend we figure out all the fights. We put $5 a fight. We pick people that we know nothing about, and we spend, from 4:30 in the afternoon till 10 at night watching the fights and just talking. And so it's stuff like that from a connection perspective that now I realize how valuable it is.
And then again, I give you credit, and for the audience listening, it's Matt Matt recognized that, and then he reached out to Elliot and I, Dom, our family, parents, and it started to repair a relationship. So again, I give you incredible credit, and I say repair because that makes when something's repair, it makes it sound like it's broken, but it just wasn't nurtured, right? The best way to say it is it was it wasn't something that was given time to.
No, it wasn't, broken or not, right? Depending on how semantics and how you define it, it wasn't fulfilling. Like it wasn't what you would necessarily want it to be. And so I think, and even repairing that, you're not going to completely change who you are. Like I'm still who I am when I show up to family stuff. I mean, we know Dom will show up 3 hours early, cook, right? Take the food home with him, like hang out with mom and dad forever, all those situations. That's not going to be us, but even being present, like, is a step in the right direction.
Where you're at now, and again, it's the audience can't tell, but Matt, I mean, the fact that he's in this chair right now, it's crazy growth. And I think you said it a little bit, but like most families don't air out everything. Certainly not on a podcast or where people can hear it. What do you think, like, just the greatest strength is for our family and for you going forward in it, and even your kids?
I would say, and I take it a little bit of a step back. Not that I want this to, a lot of it to be back to my divorce and going through that, but I wasn't a good husband. Like at the end of the day, like I realized that, like we didn't love each other, maybe we did for a period of time, but I wasn't really a good partner either. And I think we've kind of seen that with everything that's gone on with the family of were we the people that we really wanted to be with the rest of the family? And I don't think we really were. And that manifests itself differently for everybody based on their personalities and everything else. But I think, the biggest thing for me is admitting where you were wrong or where you were substandard or weak. And then how do you get beyond that? Right. And it's not a switch you flip overnight. Like it's not going to change. And there are going to be parts of it that may never change, but getting to a better place from where you realize you were that wasn't ideal. I think that shows a lot of strength and is part of the journey.
I love that. And it goes back to kind of like you said, identity, right? It's like, well, this was my identity in the family. I'm going to live to this, but then saying, wait a second, that actually is not going to serve me if I stay in that identity role, right? To the tune of saying like, if I'm not a good uncle, I don't need to stay in that space. If I'm not asking about, how are you doing or getting deep with you, I don't need to stay in that space. I can challenge myself to get out of that space.
Yeah. And I mean, look, prior to 6 months, a year ago, we'd communicate when we all showed up at family events. Like, and I was way worse. Like you guys and Dom talked all the time. But like, I wasn't checking in with you. I wasn't seeing what was going on. Like you weren't reaching out to me and that like, it just what it was. It had been like that for 20 years. And I think that's changed a ton. Right. So, I mean, it's getting past where exactly as you said, wasn't the best uncle because I wasn't going to stuff. Now Mason's going to spend a day with you looking at real estate next week. Like that wouldn't have happened before. And so it's how do you get beyond where you were? Some of this has come up on the podcast of, the relationship between you and Elliot and Dom and everything else. I mean, we weren't naturally going to be close. I was 6 years older. And by the time we could actually have a relationship of any kind, I left. I was 12. You guys were 7, 6, something like that. And pretty much the rest of our lives, we saw each other on vacations. Like that was pretty much it, or maybe a bit in the summer, but we weren't all close because we weren't together either.
Yeah. And again, to share, it's, if Matt was 12, we were, I guess 5 or something so he went to boarding school. We didn't know, we saw our brother come back for a week, and then maybe even the summer. I don't remember a ton of summers. We loved having an older brother, right? but we didn't exactly know what that was.
Yeah.
We didn't know what that really meant. Like it was kind of exciting. And then you don't I remember we'd make fun of Matt, but we were childish, right? We also didn't know, you know, we weren't
Yeah.
taught how to be younger brothers, I guess, or that's the typical younger brothers. I don't know. Um, and it's just interesting because it takes time. It just takes time to learn and then grow that relationship. But you're never too late to grow that relationship. And I think at the end of the day, uh, you always have so much love for your family, right? So, um, you're like, oh, this is an opportunity to actually to feel what like family's about,
Yeah.
right? So I think that love has brought us all together because it's like, oh, we do feel like a family.
Yeah.
Like
No, for sure.
we've let a lot of the guardrails down. You know, Ellie, 2 divorces, different stuff with children, kids events and different things. Ellie going through stuff. I'm going through stuff. You just it was all just brushed under the rug,
Yeah.
It was just like everyone stay in their own lane, and we'll applaud the successes, right? Um, but it was just so very like
Yeah. I
each one's
mean,
doing their own thing.
at the end of the day, I think the two biggest things from a family perspective were obviously Elliot going through rehab twice and realizing how precious life is, right? And how vulnerable he was. And I think that changed a lot of the dynamics at the end of the day because people had to worry about beyond themselves. Like full credit to you, but I mean, you've been, his rock for a long, long time. Um, so I think seeing that, Elliot going through the divorce, me going through the divorce, et cetera, I think it really opened us up as a family. So it's traumatic, but if the benefit at the end of the day is you're that much closer and you have better relationships, then it's worth it.
Yeah, and I give Elliot so much credit because you said it, he was so vulnerable. I listened to Elliot's second podcast today and the things he was talking about, and I'm sitting there almost like egotistically asking him questions that this can't happen to me and blah 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 because mine, I'm not taking prescription meds and wow, I mean it hit me the way it hit him, similar family dynamics, similar going to boarding school, similar I got to do more, I got to do more, I got to
Yeah.
do more external hits and so much of this podcast is to teach the audience or to help people um, learn and either A, if you're going through it, know you're not alone, or B, you want to help your brothers, right? Like so, um, Dom, I talked about it. It's like Dom, like put your oxygen mask on first, and then with Matt sitting across, it's like we're here for you, like you're not alone, like you won't be alone, like we can go travel, we can hang out here, we watch football, we can do things um that we weren't doing,
Yeah.
right? And also it doesn't need to go to that bad place or it doesn't need to go and if it does, guess what? We're also a phone call away. I share voice memos with Matt and he asks how I'm doing. And like he genuinely asks. And the truth is we never had that relationship.
Yep.
We never had that relationship. And I think the relationship grows because you say, me too. Hey, guess what? Nothing's perfect for me either. It may look like that in the magazine or, the advertisement or the podcast. But the beauty of being vulnerable is it's the idea to say like, me too.
Yeah.
Like we don't have it figured out. You're right. We have some incredible lives. You have healthy kids. You have an incredible girlfriend. Um, like you said, on a grand scale, it's through the roof.
Yeah.
But that doesn't equate to no struggles and traumas and protecting around those traumas and then having to figure them out to enjoy life as best you can.
Yeah. And you've got to be willing to be uncomfortable, right? At the end of the day, like even, coming over here to watch football, not something I would normally do. And it's not in the big scheme of uncomfortable, it's not that hard to do. But is it something for someone who's super introverted and who hasn't done it for 20 years? Uncomfortable? For sure.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've got to get past those little kind of hurdles in your way.
And uncomfortable is so relative. Like you said, like for an introvert, that's difficult. For an extrovert, you know, they deal with other things that are difficult. For non-creatives,
Yeah.
they deal with things for entre I mean, it's just this constant like I have a problem sitting still. Some people like that's are you kidding me? I could spend a whole day sitting still,
Yeah.
and that would be someone's fear. So it's just I think it goes back to patterns. I think, one question to end up, and then we'll get into your charity, but we talk so much about patterns
Mhm.
on the show and how that dictates our life. Um, what do you think, going forward for you, just personally, is that pattern you're gonna keep watching out for?
Um, I think it's 2 things. I think number 1 is always gonna be addiction. Right? I've struggled with an eating disorder my entire life. Like, I will never get by that, but you take small incremental steps to get away from it. And I think being cognizant of not replacing one addiction with another, whatever it might be. I went from eating to weightlifting to gambling to this to that. And I think it's being cognizant enough to know when you're getting yourself into a hole and not letting yourself go down that road. I haven't gambled in 10, 15 years. And I used to be in Vegas every 6 weeks and spending more money than I ever should have. And went through some really, high highs and really down lows. And so I think that number 1 is a big piece for me is not going down that road, replacing one addiction with another. I think the other thing is not being as introverted as I am. And it's great, seeing my kids. The one Mason is the most social, outgoing, like best friends with everybody, has no issues kind of meeting people, this, that, whatever. With Judd, he is a little bit more introverted and, he doesn't want to go to the school dance. He'd rather hang out with me and watch fighting or whatever it might be. And I think, for me, it's stepping out of my comfort zone, but also kind of modeling that for my kids so that they don't have the same mistakes that I feel like, if I could go back 25 years, would I be as introverted as I am? No. And there are little things I could have done to be better about that. Now I'm trying to. But that's the other thing is just not being so closed off to talking to people about what I'm going through, what's going on, what's pissing me off, what am I excited about, et cetera. And that's family, friends, everybody.
And so I guess, for the audience listening, if a message you were giving them to them would be like, you know,
You can't do it on your own. Like at the end of the day, and I think there's so much about society and ego of, getting to a certain level of status, right? And it's always about if you were able to do it on your own or get to this level of success, you're kind of the pinnacle of whatever. Nobody gets there on their own. Like, and I think realizing that you've got to rely on others for help, for support, etc. And your biggest success is if you're able to be successful but bring people with you. I mean, I think you've done that with, Eric and other people that work with you. Not that they're not super capable, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about those relationships.
yeah, I love that. I always said that too. Like winning with other people is the most fun thing to do.
Yeah.
The winning by yourself means nothing.
No,
You
one of
know?
like my favorite job, one of my favorite jobs was when I was Kellogg a few years ago and I had a team of 10 or 12 people and it wasn't, me doing the work myself, but it was how do I coach up people who are totally different objectives to getting where they want to go in life. And like their success became my success or in my own mind to an extent, like that's what I was excited about.
Love that. That was always my drive too. It was like, how do we bring everyone along for the ride,
Yeah.
right? And people would say, "What's your favorite thing in real estate?" And I was like, "Everyone succeeding." And I'd say like, that's the fun in bringing the family back together, right? It's like, all right, let's win together. Let's be this family, right? And um, I think what's so cool because now we've had everyone on the podcast solo. And I don't know if we'll get all six in the room. That probably would be pretty damn incredible.
That would be eye-opening.
Um,
I think you go to the younger family members next. That'll be
yeah,
entertaining.
that's right. But like, I think I'm just proud of the fact that everyone's willing to just see what this becomes, right? Like, it's a truth of a family. Like individually, all of us, we have our own dynamic, our own way, our own everything. And at the end of the day, we're just human, right? And we're
Yeah.
learning.
And we don't, I mean, there's stuff, we don't all agree on, you know, going back to our parents, you guys probably, and resentment may not be the right word. You guys are probably a little bit deeper into how you grew up and what the relationship with mom and dad was and everything else. I understand where you're coming from. I may never feel the exact same way, but it still doesn't block us from moving together as a family. Like, what's the bigger objective? And I think it's important to remember, like, what's the end goal?
Yeah, and I've said that to mom because she has said this to me, like, "You resent me," and I'm like, when you go through the process, you don't know how you feel.
Mm,
You're angry, you're upset, you don't know what's yours, what's not yours. You get to a point of comfortability and you're like, "It made me me, and the past is the past," and you did so many great things,
yeah.
um, right, as well, like, you were learning as well, and that's a learning process, right? Like, that's a learning process for both people, but yeah, I think once you get to a level of comfort, you're like, "Well, it's me,"
Yeah.
right? Like,
Well, and
so
it goes back to you're letting the little things go, right?
yeah.
The little things that aren't as important as the big scheme.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
The big scheme was we were taken care of, we were healthy, we were given education, we were given opportunity.
yeah.
Um,
And now the big scheme is how do we come together as a family and enjoy each other, you know, with the time that we still have.
yeah, yeah, our parents are in their 80s. And so that's that's another challenge. And um, I said this to my mom. I said, "What an incredible opportunity you have every day to have a better relationship with your kids and your grandkids and possibly your husband."
Yeah. Possibly.
Right? But that's a purpose
Yeah, for sure.
every day.
Yeah,
So
100%.
it's pretty powerful. You brought it up, but charity of your choice.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one because this is a little non-traditional. And normally, what we did on the family one, I said any animal charity at the end of the day, huge passion for animals. But um, so this one's a little bit different. Lacrosse is, a big part of our lives. And a couple of years ago, one of my best friends out of California and I met a kid from Austin who didn't have the means to be able to play on a national level. And it was a really, really good player. And so my friend and I decided to sponsor him, for lack of a better term. So take care of hotels and flights and this and that. I actually saw him last weekend. He's a junior down at Lake Travis, and he's now getting D1 offers, which for him is, life changing. Like that's going to open up doors that he never would have had. And he's been afraid to really go deep with some of the coaches because he realizes I'm going to get a scholarship, but the reality is I'm not going to be able to pay for everything else. Like there's going to be a ton of other costs of living and food and this and that. And you're a D1 athlete, but if you're not playing football, basketball, you can't cover that stuff. Like that's just, you either have to get a job or this or that. And these kids are working out 5 hours a day. And so what I'd like to do, and whatever the amount is for Alex to donate to this kid, so that he can go through college and kind of continue the journey that we've been supporting him on, and have the opportunities that he never would have had. And so it's not your typical, charitable organization, but that to me is something I'm really passionate about. And I think would have a huge impact on somebody.
I love it, and we will absolutely do that, and you can continue to give us updates on what he's doing, but
Yeah.
that is charity. That is I have to ask you this. What's the emotion that builds for you when you can say, "Look, I'm doing this for that person," and that's part of the reason why I was willing to get uncomfortable today?
I think at the end of the day, you want to be able to have an impact, and they're phenomenal charitable organizations. And obviously, Dom's super involved with the St. Jude's. You guys have done Big Brother, Big Sister and everything else, but just donating to something versus being a part of it and seeing the impact it can truly have. I've donated money to lots of different charities and this and that, but I was never really super invested in it. And seeing the impact that we've been able to open up doors for this young man and where it's going to take him for his life, like that's really resonated with me. And I think, sports there are a lot of different ways of getting there, but that to me was like, look, this is going to be uncomfortable. It still is. I feel like I have things crawling up my skin. Um, Not as bad as I thought it would be, but still, but at the end of the day, I thought, you know what? If I can help benefit someone because you're generous enough to give to a charity, then let me get out of my comfort zone. It's just that much more of a reason to do it.
And this feeling out of your skin is just because you're tapping into your emotion and you're talking about your emotion?
Um, I think it's a little bit of that. It's funny being introverted, like some of the struggles I've gone through, like one-on-one, I'm happy to talk about that. I have no issues with that. I think it's more being on camera, being on, like, I was the one who had stage fright. I was the one who didn't want to be the center of attention for any reason. And this is kind of the polar opposite of that at the end of the day. People are looking at you. People are going to watch this. People are going to judge you, good, bad, or indifferent, right? And I think that's a vulnerability that I've never been comfortable with.
Yeah, that's good for you. Good for you. We end the podcast not with everyone, but certainly with every family member. I love you.
Love you too.
Thank you for listening. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Alex Perry on Fire. It means so much to me and the wonderful team that makes this all possible. I'm now passing the flame to you. Please follow, like, and subscribe so you can always stay up to date. Thanks again, and stay fired up.